Is there any evidence for the existence of God? Upon first asking that question, you might think that the questioner is a little bit simple, but in reality, very intelligent people have asked that question about God's existence. And the basis for the question usually has to do with a person's experiences. How can there be a God, they say, if, and then they usually give some kind of a personal experience in which they have some trouble with things are happening in the world or some kind of trouble that they had experienced in their own life. The existence of God, however, cannot be limited just to our own human experience, although there certainly is that is important for us. We'll look, though, at our human experiences of God in a moment, but more than that, I think I should say that, to be honest, God himself has revealed himself to us. The Bible gives us the clearest evidence of God's existence, especially as we know it and shown it in Jesus Christ, his Son, the sacrificial love that God has for him and for us in that gift of himself. But the real proof is in Jesus. Now, I'm really jumping ahead of myself. Let me back up a little bit and kind of answer the question itself. Is there then any evidence for the existence of God? That's a traditional question that people have asked for over 1,000 years. And there are at least seven answers that have been traditionally given to that one question. First, I want to start with just conscience. Everybody has this sense of right and wrong. It's often called the moral argument for the existence of God. We have a sense of oughtness inherent in our being. Second evidence for the existence of God is called the cosmological argument. In other words, where did the world come from? While evolutionists will often argue for an eternal nature of matter, most scientists suggest that there really was some kind of a beginning of matter. Even those who would advocate the Big Bang Theory, for example, suggest that there was something that started it. That cosmological argument then suggests that there was somebody that started it would have to be God. Psalm 19 tells us in the Bible that the heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament shows his handiwork. A third argument for the existence of God comes from what's called the teleological argument. We have the cosmological argument looking at the beginning of the world. The teleological argument says, what's our purpose in life? There was a book that was written several years ago by a Roman Catholic philosopher named Teilhard de Chardin, and he wrote the book, and it was called The Omega Point. As if there's some kind of a purpose, there's some kind of a leading in our lives, there's something that's directing us, so there's a purpose in life. That again, that sense of purpose would be that argument then that God gives us that sense of purpose. Probably the most interesting argument for the existence of God is called the ontological argument for the existence of God. It was written by a monk named Anselm way back in about 1100. Now, his whole concept of God, he said, I don't want to talk about God from this basis of the Bible. I want to just kind of think through, could there be a God? And as he thought about it, he would often kind of have the meditation. He said, God is that than which nothing greater can be conceived. And so what he's saying is that if I keep thinking, is there something there? Is there something bigger than me? Of course. Is there something bigger than my room? Yes, there is. You can think of your room not existing. Is there something bigger than where your community? Of course. Is there something bigger even than our globe? Sure, there's something bigger. And you can get bigger and bigger and bigger until you finally have this sense that there's some bigness, something out there that's bigger than everything. And Anselm said that proves the existence of God. If you can think about it, it must actually exist. A fifth argument would be something that philosophers would call, but there's a natural religious quality in people. It's called the homo religiosus argument for the existence of God, that people have this sense that there's somebody there. The man upstairs is often the phrase. C.S. Lewis, in his book Mere Christianity, would talk about that there's something or someone watching us. That sense of there's somebody out there would be, again, kind of a natural argument for the existence of God. A sixth argument is known as the aesthetic argument. Why is there beauty? Now, we can certainly argue that some things are beautiful. A flower is beautiful, so it gets pollinated. Animals are beautiful, so they mate. But if you ever think about it, why would we have a beautiful sunrise or a sunset or just a beautiful scene in nature? There's nothing that's practical there about that beauty, and yet we could say that God created that sense of beauty, and that would be another evidence for the existence of God. The final argument that usually is used would be the argument from history. certain things happen in history. We might say, well, it just happened by coincidence, and yet there are certain coincidences that just seem to be planned. And that argument then would be that God put that plan there, that God is working in history to create certain events from happening, or certain events to happen. For example, there might be a bank of clouds that come over an army, and then all of a sudden that the clouds go away and the enemy gets wiped out for some kind of a reason. That argument, would you say that God then is there guiding that history? Are there other arguments or other proofs for the existence of God? Certainly there are. I remember when I was in second grade, I thought, well, if there's a God, we should believe in him. If there wasn't a God, and I believed it wasn't going to hurt me, if there was a God and I didn't believe in him, then I'd be in trouble. As I got to college, I realized that my little second grade argument for the existence of God was developed by a very famous mathematician, philosopher, and atheist turned Christian named Blaise Pascal. It's called Pascal's wager. He said, if you believe in a God who doesn't exist, you don't lose anything. If you don't believe in a God who does exist, you're going to be really hurting. And so his argument was, it's better to believe in a God because it's not going to hurt you. Now, more than God's existence, though, is really knowing who God is, that he loved you enough to send his Son to be your Lord, to be your Savior.